Now my honor and privilege to invite Professor Binod Khadria ji to initiate the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure coming back here. It's become an annual event. Last year also I was here, and Sachi, my friend, I don't see him. He has some technical problem perhaps. Well, thank you for sharing the data. Certainly we need to look at data and then also at the narrative of the budget. So very briefly, if I look at the overall data, then the budget estimate, I'm not looking at the revised estimates. They are irrelevant at the moment. Only the budget allocations are comparable with last year. And last year it was broadly 48 lakh crore, the total. Now it is 50 lakh crore. So it looks like 4% increase in the overall budget. And same for education. Education, 1,25,000 crore. And then we have this last year, this year, 1,28,000 crore, rounded figures. So if we look at these figures, then we cannot ignore the rate of inflation. If the rate of inflation by conservative estimates of the government itself is 5%, then the 4% increase in the overall budget from 48 lakh crore to 50 lakh crore is actually an illusion. There is actually if you discount it by 5%, then it's not a 4% increase, it's 1% decline in the overall budget. That we have to keep in mind. And similarly, if we look at education budget, I'm not going into the breakup between higher education and secondary education or lower levels of education, then we find that this was 2.6% of the total budget last year. This year, it is 2.5% of the total. So that percentage itself has gone down without discounting for the inflation. If we discount it for inflation, then in real terms, there is a reduction of 2.6% in education also. So this is something that needs to be kept in mind throughout. Last year, I was comparing allocations to education with defense and Northeast allocation. I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to draw your attention to commerce and industry because that's one of the focal points, and energy. So if we look at these two sectors in comparison to education, then we find that in the commerce and industry sector, we have a 33% hoping increase of 33% as compared to 2.4% in education. And that too, if we discount it by 5% inflation, that 33% increase in commerce and industry would stand at 28%. Whereas in education, it is standing at 2.6%. Similarly, for energy, it was a 19% increase, and discounting, it comes to 14% increase. So you can see that there is a deceleration in allocation in education sector as a whole. And of course, we need to keep in mind the receipts also. Receipts, it says that there will be a 4.4% fiscal deficit, and then there is only 35 lakh crore other than borrowing. I'm not going into the details of that. What I will flag here, last year I had said, what is the significance of the 6% allocation target right from the National Education Commission to reach 6%? We had not given a thought to this earlier, but I mentioned that this was because the education's contribution to GDP was more than 6%. And that's what we were asking to be returned to the education sector. We are not begging. This year, we find that it is not going to exceed or come closer to 6% even. That I think is something which still remains at the back of our mind. Having said that, I have heard the presentation of different targets, different schemes that are going to come in terms of number of students of IITs at the higher education level, 100% increase to 1.35 lakh in in the last 10 years. That's the increase which has been flagged, and additional infrastructure. 5 post 2014 IITs will be given additional seats of 6,500. The amount would be given 6,500 crore. Patna would have a hostel and extra infrastructure and so on. The narrative goes on. We can look into the details with a microscope. Uh, but what are the main points of this budget? The main points of this budget are the four engines. Four engines are agriculture, MSME, investment with a focus on private sector, and exports. Now, this is where I think the novelty of this particular budget lies in terms of giving a priority to agriculture. Now, in agriculture also, I found that the Honorable Finance Minister very imaginatively began with talking about pulses, which is a vegetarian diet, and fisheries, which is a non-vegetarian diet. And I thought these are both sources of protein, which is required for good health. Good health is required for good education, and good education and health are required for higher productivity, which is dipping. Why it is dipping? Because demand has dipped, employment has dipped. All these need to be given boost. That was explicitly mentioned. What has been kept in the perspective is Vikasit Bharat in 2047, which is 22 years away from now. So the budget has different, landmarks like 22 years from now, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now. So this is how we need to understand to reach the Vikasit Bharat level in 2047 with 100% good quality school education, 100% skilled labor with meaningful employment, 70% of women in economic activities, and farmers to make India the food basket of the world. And 10 broad areas focusing on 4 categories of people. They are called Garib, means poor, youth, of course, youth means Yuva, Annadata, the farmer, and Nari, women. So this is what the perspective is. And if we come to higher education, then there are some contradictions that I find. First of all, the underlying assumption under this budget. I also listened to the economic survey which was presented just before the budget, and the chief economic advisor presenting it with a press conference was trying to say that the focus of this budget is going to be deregulation. Now, when it comes to deregulation, to bring in private sector in a massive way. That's the purpose, and that has been explicitly mentioned, because in the trilogy of government, private sector, and academia, the private sector needs to be brought up, government needs to withdraw, and academia has to be encouraged in R&D particularly. I find that these narratives actually do not fit with each other. Why that is so? First of all, investing in people, investing in people, that has been explicitly mentioned. To increase productivity, wages have to be raised, because if more wages means more purchasing power, and that would boost the productivity that we have. All other things are there in terms of broadband connectivity to schools, Bharatiya Bhasha, digital books, and so on and so on. Those are details. Let me not go into the details, but come to the broad focus. Now, one thing, the IIT, and of course, the last engine is export. So export of what? Export of goods or export of people? We have to keep in mind that our highly educated graduates are not given employment at home. So they are exported. And that's happening across the board. we look at the recent agreements with Japan in medium skilled category, with Greece medium skilled category, Israel medium skilled category, and Germany high skilled category. In Germany, the quota, visa quota, was 10,000 per year that they will accept from India. At one go, when there was a meeting between the Chancellor and our Prime Minister, at one go, this was multiplied by 8 times. So that now 90,000 highly skilled, mostly engineers, would be given visa to come to Germany. So why that is the question. I mean, that's because we cannot provide them employment at home. Useful employment is not being provided. So that is where I need to understand that in these frontier categories of human capital, engineering, medical education, and so on, what is the plan for their employment? That needs to be spelled out along with giving us promises that these are going to be educated. Are they going to be usefully employed at home? Or are we going to be just having satisfaction of sending them abroad and expanding our diaspora? That is the question that I think we need to ask ourselves in terms of looking at this um, particular budget, which has many qualities in terms of, in principle, I would say the budget has certain very important path breaking, positive aspects that need to be harvested properly. But for that we need a blueprint, we need a roadmap, and that roadmap is still to come. That's not there inherent in the protest. I find the talk of there are contradictions between the economic survey presentation and the presentation of the budget. For example, right? I started by drawing your attention to inflation, to the rate of inflation. Why am I taking 5% as the rate of inflation? Because that's the average. That's the average which is being projected. The rate of inflation for food products, it is admitted by the economic survey presentation by our chief economic advisor, Dr. Anand Nageshwar, in the press conference, is that the food price inflation is 8%, as high as 8%. I found it amusing to listen to that presentation where the entire team which was presenting the economic survey were nodding at each other when the chief economic advisor said, well, this is 8%, but if you take out 3 items, onion, potato, and tomato, then it would come down to 5%. I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry because that sounded like I was in 18th century France when Mary Antoinette said, if you don't have bread, then eat cakes. It's that kind of a logic of saying that, see, potato, onion, and tomato are the major ingredients of household diet. And the shopping list, shopping basket that we have, the major component goes into these 3 categories. Now, if we keep taking out these things, then we are creating an illusion that the inflation rate is lower than what it is actually. I'm not going to take more time. I think my time is going to be up. I would like to conclude by saying that I must congratulate the Honorable Finance Minister for doing something that she missed last time. In the last budget, I had said that the last budget last year was Finance Minister's 7th budget in a row. And I gave the allegory of Sat Janam, Sat Fere, seven years each. And this was the 7 years experience was not reflected in the presentation of the budget last year. But I'm not sure whether our Honorable Finance Minister heard about IMPRI's initiative and listened to our discussion here. This time, she did not miss that. She took the Sat Janam, she acknowledged that, and then She acknowledged it in her final masterstroke, that was to woo the India's middle class by the direct taxes, the concessions that have been given in the direct taxes. If you have noticed, I am comparing these Sat Janam, Sat Fere, etc., with the 7 slabs that have been provided. Each slab is of 4 lakh rupees, starting with 0, and then goes up to 30 lakh rupees of direct taxes. That's a huge concession that has been given to woo the middle class. And on top of that, the exemption limit has been raised from 7 lakh to 12 lakh, hoping increase. And I would say that I tend to think, because the finance minister actually recited 2 poems, couplets of poems during her presentation, which is very inspiring. And I thought that at the back of the mind of Honorable Finance Minister was, after that Sat Janam was, or Sat Fere or Saptapadi, was the Ashtapadi. And the Ashtapadi is something that Jayadev had composed in the 12th century to narrate the bonding between Krishna and the gopis. So our Krishna this time has been successfully, been wooing the middle class. Let's wait and see the gopinis in the middle class, whether they deliver or not in terms of having a productive consumption. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.